Alright, ladies and gentle ducks, we have before us, we just got this in the mail today. This will be my second one of these units. First one looks good so far. There are some issues with these. This is the HappyModel EPW 900 MHz PWM receiver. Now, there's been a few problems with these some people have had where they're in constant bind mode. I haven't had that problem. I haven't had that issue. So let's see what's in the bag. Comes in a nice static pouch. In the bag we have a 868 Hertz for you Europeans out there. And I guess it would do in a pinch if you busted the other one. Mind you, you could probably just trim it a slight little bit. Probably if you pull these off the end and cut it a little bit shorter on the right places, you would magically have a second 915 megahertz antenna. Because I mean, all it is the length of it, and then 868 hertz is a longer antenna. So there you go. Put a label on it, relabel it, cut it off to the same length as the other one. You should be good. Now these are the Immortal T style of antenna, such as was popularized by Crossfire. And what do we have? So we have the 915, which is the one I need because I am in Canada. We have some cute little stickers in that special. And we have some headers. Yay. Okay. So, this is the second one of these I've gotten. And, yeah, it is how I remember it. So basically, the PWM is the row closest, and the power is the row in the middle, and the negatives are the row on the bottom. And they are also labeled on the back. So 6 is the one on this side, and 1's the one on that side. Now, people have had some problem with these being in constant boot mode, which suggests to me that there is a possibility of either a physical fault in the board or a fault in the software. Now, I won't totally rule out a fault in the software because the last one I got, even though it was ExpressLRS 2.0, it would not go into Wi-Fi mode. Well, I would say it was in Wi-Fi mode, but the Wi-Fi hotspot that it puts out for you to do firmware upgrades and everything would not show up on any of my devices. And I couldn't connect to it anyway or how, till I flashed it over the UART. And I flashed it over the UART, and then now it shows up. It's fine. All is good. And I wanted to flash it anyways because I put a binding phrase in it so I don't have to bind to it every time I use a different one. I just have the same binding phrase in all of my ExpressLRS, and whichever one gets turned on, it just binds to instantly. It's kind of nice that way. I have a Radio King TX18S, which is a knockoff of the Radio Master 18, and almost a complete clone of the Jumper 18. And it's OpenTX radio. I just did a video upgrading it to the latest Edge Black Pearl. So if you want to upgrade your Radio King, go to that one. But anyways, back to this receiver. So this receiver is for flying wings or RC cars or any older devices that you, or more legacy style devices where you need a pulse width modulation 6 channels out to run it. The only thing about this is channel 5 seems to be an on or off channel. Channel 6 you can run a 3 position and then the rest are variable. I've never tried to hook up a pot to channel 6, so I don't know if it's completely variable or just 3 channel. But channel 2 is only 2 position, basically, top or bottom. But this gives you, just having these PWM channels gives a lot of room to grow. So I'm gonna have to solder these headers in here now. Back to that problem that people are having with it being in constant boot mode on some of them. So if that is an issue with the firmware being corrupted or missing or something like that, because it's staying in boot mode constantly, you might be able to repair it by flashing it over the UART, which would involve using any of the power and negatives and channels 2 and 3. Now, when I've done this in the past, I've had to switch the RX and TX to what it suggests on the HappyModel website. And I suspect this one, I got it from the same vendor, so it will probably be the same. But the thing I'm wondering is if it is actually a physical problem that before it's shipped is not there. However, these things are very mass produced and very cheaply produced. So if we look at the back side of this, so we've got the signal wire as being this one, and then we've got the negative being this one, the positive being this one. That means that on this board, the positive goes past this one and the negative goes past this one. They probably pass on either side of it. And if you look, this is actually, by number 6 is actually a little bit wider. By number 1 it's very narrow here. So when you're soldering these, it is quite likely that the narrowness of the board, the mass-produced cheapness of the board, makes it very susceptible to heat here. So I would suspect that the negative was on this side and very close to the edge where it's very narrow and very susceptible to heat. So when you're soldering it, even if you're soldering it completely correctly and nothing wrong with your soldering technique at all, just the heat from your soldering iron could possibly damage this or warp this just enough to screw up the negative, and that would connect the negative to your signal wire on number 1, which is how you put it into bind mode. So if somehow that gets crossed, and I mean even if it's just a fault in the board when it's being manufactured or shipped that they don't catch, any bridging of that will put it permanently into bind mode, and not even flashing it will solve that problem. So when you solder on these, I would be very, very, very careful about how much heat I apply to this first row where it's so narrow here on this side. This side seems to be wider, but I'm wondering if there's a problem right there. That would be the one I solder first, and then I'd move on to the other ones. Actually, that will be the first one that I solder on the entire row of everything, which will keep this narrow bridge the coolest. And I will be doing it probably from this side, with my iron basically coming in on this side of the pin, just like my blue zip tie is right now. So I'll be very wary like that. When I solder it, I'll be coming in much like this to heat up that pin, and heating up on the pin just enough to melt some flows onto the rest of it, and then I'll be quitting and I'll be moving on. And I'll be going across this entire row, then I'll be putting the positive header in, going across that entire row, then I'll be putting the negative header in, going across that entire row. And I'll be taking my time doing it so I don't heat this up too much, because it's pretty damn small. And then once I get done, I will be hooking up. I'll be hooking up my C210 board to it. CP210 board. I forget what it's called. So we're going to use the CP2102 USB module board. And we're going to use off of it the 3.3 volt as the positive, the GND as the ground. Skip over the 5 volt, don't use it. The TX and the RX. So I'm just using this to power this as a power supply. I'm just going to plug it into a power bank, which should... Oh, look at that. Look what I've got. I have the solid green. The solid green is the dreaded problem. It has just booted into boot mode. The dreaded boot into boot mode. So the first test I'm going to do with these is to see if there is, using a continuity tester, see if we have a ground between these two. So there's no physical connection between, I don't hear any tone, so there is no physical problem with this board. There's no connection between that PPM and the ground on number one. Number one's the one closest to the aerial. That would cause it to go into boot mode automatically. But yeah, it just went right into boot mode. That's interesting. Let's just try it again, see what happens. Plug in our the wires crossed. Put that to there, ground it. Look at that, she's right into green immediately. So she's going right into boot mode. So let's unplug it. Let's try a couple things. Let's move these to number 2 to power it. And let's turn on the boot indicator. See what happens. She's green right off the bat. Interesting. So I guess the next thing to try to do in this situation is try to see if we can hook it up to a computer and flash it with the newest ExpressLRS. Since it wants to be in boot mode, maybe the software is just corrupted or gone from it from shipping. Got introduced to a static electric charge, who knows. But we'll hook it up to the laptop and we'll try to use ExpressLRS configurator to flash it over UART, and we'll see what happens. So I need to connect RX to TX. So brown should go on 2 and orange should go on 3. If that doesn't work, I'll reverse them and try that. So here we go. We've got our configuration for, we have a serial to TTL converter. We'll hook that up to the laptop and try and flash it. Alrighty, so we ended up UART flashing this thing with Express Configurator, and it said success. So let's see what happens when we plug it in. So we removed everything but the power wires. Let's hook it up to a USB power pack, see what happens. So we have a blinking light, which means it's looking for something to bind to. Now I flashed this with a passphrase, so I should not have to do anything in my radio. Any model I've got set up that looks for ExpressLRS with that passphrase should connect to it like nothing, nobody's business. If I leave it too long, it should go into fast blink and make a Wi-Fi hotspot. You can go to your browser, so you connect to it via Wi-Fi from a Wi-Fi enabled device, like a laptop. And then you would look for ExpressLRS as the network, put in ExpressLRS as a password, and then point your browser at, I believe it's 10.0.0.9 for an address. I can't remember. Look it up for sure, to be sure, at ExpressLRS. And then a web page will come up that allows you to do firmware and whatnot. Oh, you saw it. It was trying to enter. Let's see here. It's doing the flash blink. So now it's putting out a Wi-Fi hotspot. Now my other one put out a Wi-Fi hotspot before I updated it, but you couldn't see it. So let's unplug it. Let's plug it back in so that it goes back into looking for binding mode. And then let's turn on a radio that should be looking for that passphrase.
Ship is about to get disarmed, reset.
And look at that, solid green. So that means it is bound to it. Wonder if I have any servos around I can connect to it. There's a little servo connected to it. Oh, look at that. It's moving. I don't know if you can see that, but if I put an arm on it, you'd be able to see it better. This camera is horrible for close-up. But the servo is moving when I move this side to side. That's on channel 1, which would be your rudder on a plane. So it is moving. You can kind of see that it's moving. So that means that the stuck in boot mode problem on these receivers is due to bad firmware. And the solution is simply to ground P1 to ground, power it up, and then flash it through a Silicon Labs device like the CP, what is it, the 2102 I've got. And you're going to have to make sure you can either use that one or you can use the RT232R or something like that it is. Will work too. You're going to make sure you've got the drivers installed for that so that Windows recognizes it or whatever operating system you're using. And then just flash it over UART with ExpressLRS Configurator. And your dead receiver should come to life. Now those little USB to UART or TTL or whatever you want to call them. They're pretty cheap. They're cost like $5. I think you can even use different things, but that's what I've used to flash things. So you flash them and they come back to life. So there you go. There's the solution to the problem that everybody's facing. It's losing its firmware somehow in shipping. Losing its shit. So that's all for now. I'm glad we could solve this problem for everybody. And I'm glad I don't have to send back this second receiver. This little puppy, I want to maybe make a foam board fixed wing or something like that, put it in. This one will probably go from plane to plane to plane to plane to whatever else. It's probably going to be a mobile unit to just pop between different cars, whatever. Maybe I'll put it in my RC snowmobile at some point. I don't know. I'm going to just use the Fly Sky for now until I get it to stop burning up esks and stuff. But that's what I get for using cheap Chinese esks. Oh well, anyways, till next time. Bye.